Okay, good. Hello guys, how you doing? We're going to go ahead and go through our lecture on chest traumas specifically. Um, it's important for us to understand. There you go, nice picture. Important for us to understand when we have traumas to the chest, exactly what we're dealing with here, because there's a lot going on, a lot of things you need to be aware of. Respirations and intake of air and heartbeat and functionality of all these organs in your chest are very, very important. The structure of the chest altogether. I gave you guys a project or a little assignment at the beginning on Monday to develop and build your own lung. um, it wasn't a requirement, but if you have the opportunity to, I really suggest you do. It's actually pretty cool. It diagrams or shows you specifically where the diaphragm would be, the lung tissue itself, the chest cavity, and when you actually pull that diaphragm out, what actually happens, how we breathe, and then you can see the importance of all these different pieces added along to it. So, if you get an opportunity, please by all means take a look at that video for me, or excuse me, that project. Okay, so understanding the basics, the chest. The diaphragm is the principal muscle of respiration as we understand. I'm going to size myself down here. This is what is responsible for inhalation and exhalation, drawing in air, pushing out air. That project that you had to work on is a perfect example of how things work. We're looking again at all the different bones and structures, muscles, and everything that are actually a part of all this. Here's a specific diagram of intercostal contacts, the movement of downward and upward, creating that inhalation, exhalation of respiration. It's the principal muscle of respiration. Remember, that's very important to remember. Sorry, new computer trying to figure it out. Okay, open chest injuries. We're going to look at two different types. We're going to look at sucking chest wounds and pneumothorax. In your definitions, I asked you to look up hemothorax and a few different ones, spontaneous as well. Now, if we break this down right here, thorax is your chest cavity. Pneumo stands for air. If I added hemo in front of it, it would be blood. If I had added hemo pneumo, it's air and blood, and that would all be into the thoracic cavity or the chest cavity. While I know that we have blood and air coming in and out of our chest cavity as we breathe, that's normal. These are abnormal situations where we might have a situation where, a situation where we're drawing air in from the outside, or we've perforated the lung and now it's actually pushing air inside the lung cavity itself, or blood into the lung cavity. And this in turn is going to start to crush things out. The sucking chest wound will be that external injury causing this to actually happen. And what we're looking at here, that diagram shows us that specifically. Collapsed lung down here at the bottom. What we have is emergency care treatment, open injury chest. We're talking about occlusive dressings, which is what you see here. These are semi-occlusive. I'll explain in a second. Tape on three sides, release pressure as needed. So this person here was stabbed or shot into the chest, and we've got the perforation of the lung tissue inside here. And this would represent your pleural space, which is the lining outside the lung. Um, and so if we perforate all of that from the outside, it's always hard for me to remember. When you exhale, push all your air out, that sucking chest wound creates negative pressure on the inside, which allows air to try and rush in through that hole, okay, through the opening. When you inhale, it creates positive pressure. That positive pressure will not allow air to come in, okay? It could actually start pushing it out, but because of the sucking chest wound, it doesn't work that way. So we create this occlusive, or in this case, a semi-occlusive dressing. The semi-occlusive dressing, you have these sides taped down, but you've got one space open. So when you exhale and it tries to draw air in, it stops the flow of air coming in. When you exhale, it actually creates a flutter valve, allowing this to open and push air out. It is actually a benefit to you in the long run, all the way around. This is the occlusive dressing for a sucking chest wound, which could be a stab wound, a gunshot, stuff like that. Here's an example of the pneumothorax, basically the cavity, the chest cavity itself, which has filled with air or blood or both. And this is the pleural space on the outside edge, and this is the actual lung tissue itself. You inhale, you exhale, air rushes in. The inhalation allows you to only fill in this space. You can't fill in the entire space because we've got pressure built on the outside, not allowing this to actually happen. This causes the collapsing of the lung. Airflow decreases overall. Pressure on the heart and vessels becomes greater. As this begins to shift all to one side, we start to get crushing of all the other organs inside. Shock is something we would be looking for and definitely going to see. Tension pneumothorax is where we're actually starting to shift everything inside the chest, creating tension and pushing. Spontaneous pneumothorax is actually possible. If you cough or sneeze too hard, it is possible that you can burst your pleural space, lung tissue on the inside, which will basically do the same thing. When I inhale, air comes in, fills in my lung tissue, but it bleeds out between the lung space, the lung tissue, and the pleural space, and eventually crushing and slowly. The difference between a pneumothorax, traumatic pneumothorax, versus spontaneous pneumothorax, the difference is traumatic one is more likely going to be outside poking in, or ribs breaking, tearing through the pleural space. You're going to have more hemothorax in that respect, the more pneumothorax that are actually going to be affected quicker. You're going to see um, a lack of respiration, inability to move air as that chest begins to create that tension pneumothorax or hemothorax where it pushes things to one side. Spontaneous, I cough, sneeze too hard, no big deal. A week from now, I start to recognize I'm having trouble breathing. I don't have any tension going on just yet, but I'm having more and more difficulty breathing because a lot of times that spontaneous pneumothorax is small and it's not going to be a very aggressive type of pneumo or hemothorax. It's actually typically pneumo in the spontaneous pneumothorax. Emergency care treatment for an open chest injury, hemothorax, accumulation of blood, accumulation of blood, collapse of the lung, and shock. So we have here the pneumothorax, where we've got air that's broken through on either spontaneous or traumatic pneumothorax, and it fills that cavity space, crushing it down. Blood from the outside, rib puncture broke through this from a trauma, and now we have blood filling up. And then we have the pneumothorax, hemopneumothorax, where we've got air and we've got blood mixing up the two, crushing it from the inside, just like anything else. This could be both traumatic or non traumatic, pretty much typically traumatic and traumatic or non traumatic, if that makes sense. Chest injuries closed. We're going to stop here. I'm not going to go much further now. We're going to take some questions from this later, based off of what we've just gone over now. I'd like to say thank you very much for being involved, and we will um, talk soon. Thanks.